Sitting in that airport gate, the noise around me blurred into nothing. You know how terminals get, buzzing with families reuniting, business folks tapping at keyboards, voices echoing over intercoms. But me, I was just a woman with a paper cup of lukewarm coffee and a carry-on that felt heavier than it should have. Then the message came in, Sage. You're not going to believe this. No greeting, no context, just a short video attached. I tapped it open, laughter, glasses clinking. My cabin. Not just some rental, they were in my cabin. I didn't tell them I bought it, didn't invite a soul. I'd kept it private on purpose after years of being told I was too sensitive and too much. But there they were, Tanya, Pamela, even cousins I hadn't seen in years, raising glasses under a crooked Welcome Home Pamela banner. My sister's name, my porch, my goddamn furniture. Then someone toasted, "Finally, a place worth celebrating in. Too bad it's not hers." They laughed like they earned it. It hit me slow, like cold water poured down the back of my neck. Not just the invasion, but the comfort. They looked comfortable in erasing me. I had bought that place in quiet. Cash. Saved every dime working freelance gigs while being called directionless. When I first got the keys, I drove up alone, sat on the front steps, and folded cloth napkins into red maple leaves. Stupid little ceremony, I guess. I'd imagined one day they'd sit around that same table, say something kind, maybe even say sorry. That dinner never happened. Those napkins never left the drawer. I could still picture them, tucked beside the unwrapped silverware I had been saving for when I felt healed. But healing doesn't come with linen and settings. Sometimes it starts with betrayal. I hit replay on the video. Pamela, standing with her glass lifted high. She always thought she was better than us. Look at this dump, and she calls it freedom. And Tanya, our mother, if you can call it that, chuckled right along. At least someone's using it instead of chasing daydreams. That laugh, I'd heard it my entire life. She used it when I cried after being overlooked, used it when she forgot my birthday, again. Used it when she told people, Colton's, artistic, like it was a diagnosis. I clenched my jaw, not in hurt, in recognition. Because that same voice had once laughed at my science fair project, trashed so Pamela could hang her piano certificate on the fridge. Nothing ever changed. I wasn't surprised. I was just done. I found a quieter corner of the terminal, behind a vending machine, phone still in hand. New messages came in, Sage again, more videos. In one, my father sat at the head of the table, comfortable, laughing. I pressed pause. They didn't forget me, I muttered. They didn't want me there. I didn't cry. And I haven't cried over them in years. That kind of pain calcifies. It stops leaking and starts hardening. The last video showed Pamela clinking glasses with Marcus, her husband, the man who once called me a cautionary tale at a family barbecue. Tanya laughed again. She was always too dramatic for her own good. That was it. I texted Sage, "Keep filming, save everything, don't interfere." Then I opened my email, attached all the clips, and hit forward. My lawyer's name popped up. The subject line read, "Unlawful entry, personal property, documentation enclosed." I stared at the screen a beat longer, not out of fear, out of clarity. They always called me quiet. Fine, let's see what silence can really do. The terminal board flipped overhead, Albany to NYC, boarding now. The drive from the airport didn't take long, but it felt like I was dragging a broken part of myself with every mile. I didn't head straight to the cabin. I stopped for gas, checked my email twice, stared at the mountains like they owed me a damn explanation. But eventually, I turned onto the gravel road, headlights sweeping over the trees I had once thought would bring me peace. 3 cars were already there. Tanya's Lexus, Pamela's crossover, Marcus's truck. The music carried out before I even stepped from the car. Not loud, but joyful. The kind that let you know nobody inside was worried about who they might be hurting. I didn't go to the front door. I walked around the back where my garden chairs had been, except now they were rearranged into a social circle. My nameplate by the steps was gone. In its place, a little chalkboard sign leaned on the railing. White cursive letters read, "Pamela's Place." I didn't feel angry right then. It wasn't anger. It was that cold wash of recognition, like finding out you never had a seat at the table, not because they forgot, but because they pulled the chair away on purpose. I stood there, just watching. Through the kitchen window, I caught Tanya wiping her eyes with a napkin. Pamela stood with a wine glass raised. Some people I didn't even recognize clapped as she toasted, "To our Marcus for finding this gem and letting us all use it." Cheers erupted. Tanya leaned in, smiled like it pained her with pride. My name? Not mentioned. My money? Not remembered. My effort? Didn't exist. Just Marcus. Always Marcus. Then came the moment that finally scraped bone. My father raised his glass. He smiled. Not a big grin, just satisfied, at ease. Like this scene made sense to him. Like I was the weird one for thinking it wouldn't. They didn't forget me. They erased me. Same act, different intention. I didn't know why I did it, but I moved toward the living room window. Closer now. And that's when I saw it. Above the fireplace hung a painting. A red maple tree on a washed-out gray field. My initials, CR, neatly marked in the bottom corner. Only now, there was a label under the frame. Pamela's Fall Vision. I felt something twist in my stomach. That painting had been mine. Made during the tail end of therapy, after I nearly lost myself to a stretch of weeks I barely remember. I gave it to Tanya once. She looked at it, said, "Too sad to hang, but thank you." Now it sat front and center, claimed by someone else. Praised. They hadn't just taken my space. They'd polished over my pain and given it a new name. Back in my car, I sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. Hands on the steering wheel. Breathing shallow. There was a quote I saved once, buried in a note on my phone. "You'll stop bleeding when you stop going back to the knife." This family was my knife. I thought of every event I attended, every time I gave too much, tried too hard, stayed too long at dinners where I barely spoke. I had never been invisible. They just never wanted to look. I opened my phone and started typing. It wasn't a message to them. It wasn't a rant. It was a record. One line at a time, I documented what I saw, what I heard, what was mine, and what they made theirs. I didn't know if I'd send it, but I needed to put it somewhere besides my chest. I drove away, not fast, not frantic, steady, down the gravel, back to the highway. At the next town, I pulled into a diner parking lot, ordered a coffee to go, and found a quiet booth with a chipped tabletop. Pulled out a notebook I hadn't opened in months. One page, written in shaky ink from last winter, read, "I want peace more than I want to belong." Below it, I wrote something new. Let them call it theirs. I'll show them what it means to really own something. Then I texted my lawyer. Just one line. "We need to update the property clause." As I finished the message, I pulled up the live feed from the cabin's security camera. I hadn't looked at it in weeks. The app opened. A familiar image loaded. People laughing inside my living room. I pressed record. By the time I turned off the highway and eased back onto the gravel road, the sun had disappeared behind the ridge. There was no moon yet, just that kind of darkness where your headlights don't really help. I parked halfway down the slope, behind a wall of trees, so no one would see the car if they were still up there. I sat for a minute. Let the silence settle in. Then I opened my phone. Pulled up the cabin's power usage logs, something I hadn't checked in weeks. The graph showed a spike 2 nights ago. Not big enough to trip anything, but enough to say someone had been messing with the generator. I got out slowly, grabbed the flashlight from the glove box. My boots made soft crunches in the gravel as I made my way up the side path behind the cabin. The house was dark now. Quiet. But something felt off. Too still. I rounded the back, toward the utility panel. That's when I saw it. The access box was cracked open, wires exposed. One loose strand dangled just above the doorframe, hanging like a spider's trap. I stared at it. "They didn't just want to erase me," I muttered. "They wanted to warn me not to come back." I reached for the handle anyway. The jolt hit like a slap I never saw coming. My arm snapped back, flashlight clattering to the porch. A sting tore through my fingers, like fire tucked under the skin. I dropped to one knee, breath gone, teeth clenched. My hand shook like it didn't know whether to keep hurting or just go numb. Not lethal, but deliberate. Somewhere in the blur of pain, a voice from the past floated back. Tanya, leaning against our old kitchen sink, laughing. Sometimes people need a shock to stop chasing dead ends. I could have laughed if it didn't hurt so bad. I pushed myself upright, dragging my feet toward the side panel and cutting the breaker manually. It clicked off with a cold thud. Not one light flickered. They'd already done what they came to do. Back in my car, I slammed the door shut and locked it. My hand was still shaking, but my brain wasn't. I texted Sage. "I need eyes. Still filming?" The reply didn't come from her. It came from Mercedes. "You might want to see this." I tapped the video open. There was Tanya, standing beside a man in a red flannel. Probably the same guy who'd installed the propane lines years ago. He was gesturing toward the generator, Tanya laughing, waving her hand toward the doorframe like she was sketching the plan mid-air. Then her voice. "Just make sure she hesitates. She won't sue. She never does." The handyman shrugged. She paid him. It was all there. I let the video loop, not because I needed proof, but because I needed to stare at that smile she wore at the end. That kind of smile doesn't come from someone afraid of consequences. I hit forward, sent the file straight to my lawyer. Then I renamed it, No More Silence Move. Inside the cabin, the air still smelled faintly like burnt wiring. I didn't go in with rage. I went in with purpose. Took out my phone, snapped photos of the door, the wires, the mud footprints on the side panel. Everything. Then I pulled my journal from my bag, flipped past old entries until I hit a blank page. This is how abusers behave when their target finally stops begging. I wrote that down, shut the book, packed a small duffel with just the essentials, dropped the cabin key into a Ziploc and labeled it, For the Court. I didn't linger, didn't walk through each room or give it a goodbye glance. Except one thing stopped me. The dinner table, still clean, still set. At the center sat one folded napkin, red in the shape of a maple leaf. One I'd made months ago. They hadn't even bothered to touch it. I whispered, "Let them call it theirs. I won't be buried under it." At the motel, I didn't even take my boots off. I uploaded the video to a secure drive, then made 3 backup copies, one on a flash, one to the cloud, one on paper. You learn not to trust too easily after a life like mine. I printed out the property deed next, labeled it with the timestamp, the file ID, everything clean. Then I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. "I'm filing," I said. "Not for money, for name, for safety." He didn't ask questions, just said, "Understood." I opened my laptop again, drafted a formal complaint to the zoning board, attached the photos, wrote a cover letter as simple as possible. Then I drafted a post. Not for now, just for later. The kind of post you keep ready like a fire extinguisher. I didn't hit publish. Not yet. Instead, I pulled up a security company's website, picked the highest tier surveillance upgrade package, remote access, night vision, motion alerts, the works. I don't like war, but I've learned how to arm myself quietly. I shut the laptop, let my shoulders drop. "You wanted silence?" I said out loud, to no one. "You've earned attention instead." Morning came with a limp ache in my right arm and the metallic taste of restraint still lingering in my mouth. I lay there on the scratchy motel bed, staring at the ceiling like it might offer some sort of blueprint for how to handle what came next. The ache in my hand pulsed with every heartbeat, reminding me it hadn't been a dream. I reached for my phone and opened the video again. Not the whole thing, just the frame. The one where Tanya pointed toward the generator, and just behind her, my father. Standing. Watching. No reaction. No interruption. He had been there. A memory rolled up out of nowhere. Me at 11, crying in the hallway after Tanya called me a liability in front of guests. He found me there, sat down beside me, and whispered, "She doesn't mean it. I'll talk to her." He never did. I didn't feel hatred, not even betrayal, just that slow, dull ache of someone who should have pulled you out of the fire, but stood by to watch it burn. I whispered to myself, the worst betrayals come quiet, in folded arms and turned eyes. By mid-morning, I had showered, dressed, and texted Sage. Coffee? Need to talk. She agreed to meet at the diner off Main, the one with the faded booths and stale pastries they never bother replacing. I got there first. Chose a seat by the window. Watched the cars pass. No rush. Sage arrived 10 minutes late, holding a small paper bag she didn't offer me. She sat down, stiff, didn't even take off her coat. When the waitress came, she just asked for tea. I ordered black coffee and waited until she left before saying anything. I assume you've seen the videos by now. She looked down at her napkin. Didn't nod, didn't blink. After a moment, she said, Pamela asked me not to get involved. I didn't move. Let the words sink in. Not because I was shocked, because it still hurt anyway. I didn't want to lose access to the foundation board, she added, quieter this time. I wasn't asking you to fight for me, I said, voice flat. I just thought you'd care. Neither of us touched our drinks. I left a 10 on the table and walked out. Didn't wait for her to speak again. What was there left to say? Outside, the autumn air bit harder than it had yesterday. I didn't flinch. Just stood by the car a while, arms folded, watching people who didn't know me walk by. It hit me then, not loneliness, but the clean, sterile awareness of being unaccompanied by illusion. No more false allies, no more anchors made of sand. I pulled out my phone, forwarded Sage the full video file, no words, just the attachment. A minute later, I sent a follow-up. In case you ever wonder why. She didn't reply, and honestly, I didn't expect her to. That silence didn't bruise. It confirmed. Later that day, when the sun started sliding behind the trees, I drove to the old garage on Westbrook. Dad was usually there this time of week, tinkering with things he had no intention of fixing. Sure enough, there he was, leaned over the hood of a rusted-out van, sleeves rolled to the elbows, rag in hand. As if the world hadn't cracked open in our backyard. He looked up, smiled. Didn't expect to see you today. I didn't smile back, just held up the printed photo. It was grainy, but clear. Tanya gesturing toward the generator. Him, arms crossed, behind her. He took the paper, looked at it a beat too long, then said, You know how your mother is. And you know how I used to believe you'd protect me. He opened his mouth, started to say something. I think it was meant to sound soft. But I stopped him with a hand raised. You didn't choose her over me, I said. You just chose not to choose, and that's louder than anything she ever said. He looked down. I turned, walked out without another word. He didn't follow. He never had. Back at the motel, I slipped off my jacket, set the folded paper down, and stared at my phone. 6 missed calls. 4 voicemails. I deleted them all without listening. Then I pulled out my notebook, wrote, I'm not angry. I'm just done auditioning for a family that never had a role for me. I paused, pen hovering. There was space on the page for more, but I left it blank. Sometimes the silence says enough. The envelope was heavy, like it knew what it was carrying. Cream-colored paper, Tanya's signature curled neatly across the front. The church's logo printed at the top left. I didn't open it at first. Just let it sit on the motel nightstand while I brushed my teeth and tied my boots like I had somewhere more important to be. But I knew what it was. An invitation to a family healing gathering. No names, no responsibility, just a sentence that read, Let's try to find common ground. It's time to rebuild. They didn't want to rebuild. They wanted to repaint. I didn't go to be part of the show. I went to see how far they'd take the act. The community hall was already half full when I got there. Neutral-colored chairs arranged in a loose circle, fold-out tables at the side holding sugar cookies, instant coffee, and lukewarm tea. Church folks in their Sunday casual, some neighbors I didn't recognize, one woman from the cabin road, and of course Tanya. Holding court like she was hosting a bake sale instead of trying to rewrite history. She opened with a speech about family unity, sprinkled with just enough God talk to let everyone relax into their seats. Misunderstandings, she called it. Stressful decisions made under pressure. No mention of the cabin, no mention of the shock, no mention of me. Pamela nodded with all the poise of a boardroom executive. Sage slid in late and took a chair at the far back. Her eyes met mine for a second, then dropped. It was all air freshener on rotting wood. Then Tanya stepped up with a folded sheet of paper and said she'd like to offer a few words on behalf of the family. She unfolded it with slow ceremony. To those who felt unseen, unheard, or hurt, I'm deeply sorry for any unintentional pain we caused. There it was. The kind of apology that doesn't name anyone or anything, and therefore means nothing at all. And yet people nodded. One or two even clapped, like it was a sermon that hit just right. I sat still, didn't blink, didn't shift. Then I noticed something. The lights were warm and even across the circle, except on me. My seat sat in the shadow of a column, a bit removed from the main arrangement. No one had pointed it out, but it was clear. No one wanted to look directly at me. I let the moment sit, let it breathe. They weren't trying to reconcile, they were trying to silence with courtesy. After the speech, Tanya smiled and said the floor was open for anyone wishing to share reflections. I stood. Tanya's eyes sharpened. Pamela sat straighter. But I didn't speak. I walked to the back of the room, poured myself a small cup of coffee, stirred in some powdered creamer, and walked right out the side door. The air was cooler than expected. Sage caught up with me in the parking lot, heels clicking fast behind. "Why didn't you say something?" she whispered. I turned, not mad, just clear. Because that room wasn't designed to hear me, it was built to protect her. I looked back once. Tanya was mid-hug with someone, smiling like a missionary returning from the field. I let the door close behind me and didn't look again. Back at the motel, I laid the invitation next to the folder marked Incident File. I didn't rip it, didn't burn it. Some evidence speaks louder when left intact. In my notebook, I wrote, "Real apologies, name the hurt. They don't hide it in white linen and stale cookies." Then I opened my laptop, finished the zoning board report, attached time-stamped images, marked every line with calm, cold precision. I hit send. Then I sat back, let the sunlight cut across my boots through the open curtains. "They want peace," I said aloud. "I want truth. And those two things don't always sit in the same room." The second invitation came 2 days after the staged apology. This time, it was for a private dinner. Tanya's handwriting was nowhere on it, just a formal printed card with gold trim and the words, "In honor of family healing." No RSVP number, just a date, time, and location. I didn't need to read between the lines. It wasn't an attempt to make peace. It was damage control. Tanya didn't want a truce. She wanted the appearance of grace. Still, I went. Not because I believed anything would change, but because I needed them to see what they'd tried to erase. I wore black. No makeup. No jewelry. I didn't bother calling ahead. When I arrived, a server looked at the list and paused before finding a spot marked Guest. That was me. Guest. They sat me at a table next to the restroom, tucked into the shadows. My chair faced the kitchen door. No centerpiece. Dim light. A waiter poured water into my glass without saying a word. One table over, Tanya was already laughing with a councilwoman. Pamela stood near the buffet, hand on Marcus's shoulder, posing for a photo with 2 realtors. They moved like they belonged, like their faces had never been caught on video directing electricians to tamper with a power line. Someone clapped Pamela on the back. "At least you found a good use for that old cabin." She smiled, said, "It needed a woman's touch." I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. Tanya passed by my table without stopping. No eye contact, just a nod, barely. No one joined me. That table wasn't a mistake. It was a message. You're here, but you're not one of us. I stayed seated, back straight, hands folded in my lap. The napkin was the only thing carefully placed. A maple leaf fold, my design, my hand, they'd reused it. Like my presence was a prop they'd borrowed for the night. Dessert came. Tanya took the mic. She started with gratitude. Thanked Pamela and Marcus for transforming that rundown space into something welcoming. She said, "It was falling apart. I'm just glad someone had the vision to see past the decay." I looked down at my napkin, then back up at her. She held up a framed photo of the cabin's new entrance. A wooden plaque beneath the porch lights read, "The Lamson Retreat." Applause. Quiet. Polite. I didn't join in. I didn't blink. Instead, I pulled out my phone, pressed record, framed the shot. Tanya, grinning, the photo, Pamela leaning into Marcus, the councilwoman clapping with her fingers barely touching. I zoomed in on my name tag. Guest. In my notes app, I typed, "You can have the photo. I have the deed." I stood, placed the folded napkin at the center of my empty plate, walked past the kitchen door. As I reached the exit, I heard Pamela behind me, not bothering to lower her voice. She's always been dramatic. But I didn't turn around. That was the power. Back at the motel, I didn't sit down right away. I laid everything out, invitation, photos, documents. Then I uploaded the video, gave it a timestamp, midnight. Set the post to auto-publish. Attached copies of the deed, notarized, proof of ownership, clean, precise. Then I opened a new email. Addressed it to the editor of the town's local paper. Subject line, not a feud, a fact. I wrote, "I'm not starting a war. I'm ending a narrative." I didn't hit send right away. I let it sit open while I made tea. Sat on the edge of the bed. And I realized something. I wasn't angry. I wasn't waiting for someone to defend me. I didn't need anyone to know I was right. Because finally, I knew it myself. Tanya's house smelled like warmed-up brunch casseroles and forced affection. I arrived just before 10. She'd said it would be casual, just family. That phrase used to mean something. The moment I stepped inside, I saw it. Framed above the hallway table was a new family portrait, glossy, big, Pamela front and center, Tanya to the left, Dad on the right. Even the kids were there, lined up in coordinating fall outfits. And me, I was cropped out, not faded, not blurred, just removed. I remembered when it was taken, a last-minute shot during one of my brief drop-ins, before everything spiraled. I'd been standing beside Pamela, smiling too wide, trying to fit in. Now I wasn't there at all. I stood there longer than I should have, staring. A voice behind me broke the silence, soft, dismissive. "We didn't think you'd want to be in it." I turned but didn't answer, just kept walking into the kitchen, heart tightening around something that had stopped beating a while ago. Yeah, inside, they were already seated around the table. Laughter filled the room, not cruel, not directed, but careless. That kind of laughter that doesn't make room for the person who just walked in. I found my seat at the far end. Of course I did. They were deep in stories, reminiscing about old trips, holiday blunders, school memories that excluded me. Tanya played hostess like nothing had happened over the past few weeks. She passed orange juice and poured syrup without ever looking in my direction. Then came the line that always lands like a knife. "I'm just grateful we've all moved past the drama," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Someone, I didn't see who, murmured, "She's always had a flair for being the outcast." I didn't eat much, just pushed food around my plate and waited for a moment to step outside. I found it between bites of silence. The backyard was quiet. I stepped onto the porch and leaned on the railing. The air smelled like drying leaves and smoke from someone's chimney nearby. Then Red appeared, Pamela's daughter. 8, maybe 9 now. She stood a few feet away, hands in the pockets of her jacket. "Are you my aunt?" she asked. I blinked. She added, "I've never seen you in any of our family pictures." There was no cruelty in her voice, just innocence. I crouched to her level, looked her in the eyes. "Yes," I said. "I'm your aunt. Some stories just don't get told enough." She nodded. That was enough for her. She ran off, back into the noise. But something in me shifted. I walked back inside, didn't stop at the table, didn't hesitate. I raised my voice, calm, clear. "Tanya, do you have a copy of the family photo from the hallway?" Her face tightened. She looked up. "I can get you one without the edits if that's what you want." I smiled, small, measured. "No need. I already have the original. Just wanted to see how far you'd go to lie." Forks stopped. Glasses clinked against plates. Pamela looked like she wanted to speak but didn't. I didn't wait for a reaction. I grabbed my coat, walked out. Back at the motel, I pulled the original photo from the envelope I'd kept tucked in the bottom of my bag. I was right in the center, smiling, real. I scanned it, uploaded it to my blog. No caption, just the title, The People I Used to Beg to Love Me. Then I found another photo, an old candid of me in red at a park years ago, sent it to Pamela in a short email. One day, I wrote, she'll ask again. Let her see all of it. I closed the laptop, reached into my notebook, folded a napkin into the shape of a maple leaf, pressed it between the pages. They didn't erase me. They just forgot how bright I shine when I'm not in their shadow. The invitation came under my father's name this time, a charity fundraiser benefiting some local initiative I'd never heard of, but every line of it reeked of Pamela's fingerprints. The cabin, my cabin, was being debuted as the launch site for their next project, the Lamson Legacy Retreat. My name wasn't on the flyer, wasn't on the guest list either, but I walked in anyway, wearing the same black coat I'd worn the day I first signed the deed. A small detail, but one that meant something to me. The lobby was loud, voices familiar and hollow. I moved through the crowd unnoticed at first, scanning the walls. Framed photos lined the entry, shots of the cabin's exterior, aerial views, cozy interior setups I didn't authorize. In every image, the new sign hung proudly above the porch, Lamson Legacy Retreat. Tanya spotted me halfway across the room. She smiled wide, manufactured, and approached like we were old friends. "Glad you came," she said. "I was worried you'd cause a scene." I didn't return the smile. "Tonight," I said, "you're the one who should worry." She blinked, caught off guard, then laughed like I was just being cheeky. She moved on. I stood by the far wall, letting the room shift around me. I didn't need to introduce myself. I was here for one thing, and it wasn't approval. That moment came sooner than I expected. Across the buffet, near the wine table, Kelly Carr, the real estate agent who knew more than she let on, raised her glass and said louder than anyone needed her to, "Wait, isn't that Marcus's cabin? That's what Pamela told me." The room stalled. Heads turned. Tanya's laugh was tight. "Oh, you know how stories get twisted," she said quickly, brushing Kelly's comment aside. Pamela stepped in, smiling too wide. "It's a shared family space," she said. "We've all put our hearts into it." I didn't say a word, just tilted my head slightly and sipped from my glass. No correction. Not yet. Truth doesn't need volume, just timing. Then came dessert. The cake was wheeled out on a silver cart, rolled right past me without pause. The writing on top, piped in thick red frosting, read, "Happy birthday, Pamela. Visionary, healer, home builder." My stomach turned. Not because it was her birthday, but because I'd ordered that exact cake design months ago. Same font, same message. It had never been served, never even opened. Tanya had said it was too much. Now, here it was, served with pride. Tanya leaned close, whispered, "You didn't do anything with it anyway. Let her enjoy it." I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, found the old order confirmation, walked over to the table and laid the printed receipt right beside the cake. Didn't speak, let the frosting do the talking. Later, when Tanya took the mic, she spoke like a seasoned politician, thanked everyone for coming. Praised Marcus and Pamela for their dedication to family restoration and legacy, called the cabin a symbol of healing. I waited for her to finish, waited for the clapping to die down. Then I walked up to the stage and asked for the mic. Tanya hesitated, but nodded. What choice did she have? I opened my folder, held it up. "This is the deed," I said. "My name, my signature, notarized and filed." People murmured. Then I lifted my phone and played the clip. Mercedes's voice faint in the background as Tanya directed the handyman to wire the generator. She laughed in the video, said, "She won't sue. She never does." When the clip ended, you could have heard a fork drop. I looked at the crowd. "You called it a dump," I said. "Then you tried to claim it. Now you'll call your lawyer." I walked off stage before the silence broke. Didn't stay to watch Tanya's face, or Pamela's panic, or the guests squirm in their seats. By the time the whispers started, I was already outside. In my car, I opened my laptop, attached the clip, the deed, and a written statement to the zoning board. CC'd the local press. No drama, just facts. Then I drove past the cabin one last time. The new sign still hung there. Lamson Legacy. But tonight, it looked less like a symbol and more like a gravestone. Back at the motel, I didn't check my phone, just watched it light up. Missed calls, voicemails, all from numbers I knew too well. I flipped it over. Then I opened my notebook and wrote, "Their silence bought their downfall. Mine bought my peace." The phone was already buzzing when I opened my eyes. I didn't reach for it. I let it ring, vibrate, and die out in the folds of the motel blanket. 6 missed calls from Tanya, 3 from Pamela, 1 from a number I didn't recognize. Maybe their attorney, maybe a church friend, maybe someone trying to clean up the mess they made without touching it. I rolled over, faced the wall. Later, over the cheap coffee that tasted more like cardboard than caffeine, I opened my email. A new message flagged at the top. Family clarification. Please read. Pamela. The message was a blanket statement addressed to friends and supporters, calling the recent incidents a result of family miscommunication, personal grief, and heightened emotions. No names, no apology, just spin. My name, misspelled, appeared once in a footnote. We wish Colton peace and healing as she continues her journey. I laughed, low and dry. Even now they're rewriting me, but I've stopped reading their script. Later that afternoon, I stepped into the small cafe off Main, just looking for something warm to hold. I hadn't planned to see him, Nazo, but there he was, standing by the barista counter, waiting for a latte with his signature smirk already loaded. He spotted me, walked over like this was casual. "I heard you finally stood up to them," he said, sliding his hands into his jacket pockets. Then he added, "Tanya said you've always misunderstood your place in that family." I didn't flinch, just sipped my coffee and looked him straight in the eye. "I did," I said, "and I fixed that. I'm not in it anymore." He let out a small chuckle, shook his head. "Some things never change." I stood, left my receipt on the table, scribbled one word across the back in pen. I did. I didn't turn around. 2 days later, I walked into the mediation office alone. No Tanya, no Pamela, just their attorney, a tight-jawed woman with papers in hand and a "let's wrap this up" tone. They offered to retract all branding, pull down the photos, kill the retreat idea, file a signed apology for my records. I told them I wasn't after money. I wanted acknowledgement. A paper trail that said, "This happened, and it was wrong." The signed apology landed in my inbox before sunset. I didn't open it. I printed it, slid it into the back of the folder labeled Cabin Documentation, and filed it away. That night, I wrote one last sentence in my journal. Closure isn't always justice, but it's enough when it stops the bleeding. For the first time, I didn't feel like I'd lost something. I felt like I got something back. The following weekend, I made the drive up to the cabin, alone. No more lawsuits pending, no more emails to send. I walked through the front door. Everything quiet. The air smelled like dust and pine and thyme. I ran my hand over the wooden frame of the kitchen archway, the stone in the fireplace I'd laid myself. Small things that still felt like mine. Then I walked to the center table, pulled out one last napkin, folded it carefully into a red maple leaf, set it down. Beside it, I left a short note on yellow stationery. This space held my pain. Now, let it hold peace. I locked the door behind me. Didn't look back. Driving away, I glanced once in the mirror, not to see what I was leaving, but to make sure I wasn't taking it with me. Leaves swirled up behind the car like they were waving goodbye. 2 weeks later, I signed a lease in a small town 2 hours south, rented a quiet cottage near the river, opened a studio, nothing big, just a space with light and room to move, started teaching workshops again, art as healing, creativity as control. On my desk, beside the lamp, I placed a framed picture of Red. Her 8-year-old smile bright under a sun hat beside me on a picnic blanket. Next to it sat a copy of the cabin deed. Sometimes I got letters from people back home. Most of them I didn't open. I wasn't bitter, just done. Then, one Tuesday morning, I opened a card from a student, handwritten. It said, "You helped me find my voice by showing me how to stop whispering." I smiled, slipped the note into my notebook. right beside the last napkin.